snuggling.
Yeah.
It's the holidays after all. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the first time we've done a tasting of this nature. I'm Camron King, and this is Stuart Spencer.
Hello, everybody.
Hopefully, you're all enjoying a nice evening out there. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the first time we've done something like this from Lodi, so bear with us. We're getting our feet wet, but I think we'll have a great interactive session, and we'll have a lot of fun. We're going to be tasting a few wines this evening. Before we get going, I want to give you a little bit of a quick update. In the tasting notes that you received, you did see that there probably was a tasting sheet for an M2 Zinfandel. We are going to be tasting the M2 Tempranillo a little bit later this evening, so I just wanted to let you know that one. So first thing, we want to give you a little bit of an update on some things that are going on here in Lodi, a little introduction to the Lodi region, and then we're going to be tasting along with you through some fantastic wines tonight. So if you're not certain where Lodi is, we are located just about 30 minutes south of Sacramento and about 90 minutes due east of San Francisco. We sit in the southern part of the Sacramento Valley, northern part of the San Joaquin Valley, but we're in a very, very distinct region of California that's perfect for growing phenomenal grapes and making great wines. Lodi has been a wine growing region for about 150 years, if not a little bit more than that. But only recently have we started doing winemaking. And I say recently, in about the last 2 decades or so. So about 20 years or so ago, we had about 6-8 wineries. Today we have over 85 wineries here in Lodi and are generating a lot of fantastic traffic and a lot of interest in some fun and exciting new varietals, and yet some of our hallmark and traditional varietals as well. So Stuart, is there anything you'd like to add as far as
I would just add that when you say we've only been making wine for 20 years, I think the small kind of boutique movement, artisan movement, has only been going on for about 20 years. When you look back in the history of Lodi, I mean, the first winery was established in the late 1850s in the area, and many co-ops existed prior to Prohibition and then were established after that. I think the distinction, is that for most of these years, Lodi grapes were going elsewhere. And we always like to say that the Lodi grapes were the industry's best kept secret, that wineries from all across California love to source the quality grapes here in Lodi, but they like to do it anonymously in many ways to keep the price of grapes low. About 21, 22 years ago, when the Winegrape Commission first got established, there were just a handful of wineries in the area. Most of those were large kind of industrial operations. And then in the early 90s, the Renaissance really began as you started to see the development of small boutique producers making vineyard-focused, vineyard-designated wines and really trying to show what the appellation can really do.
Yeah, and it's like I was saying before, we're really positioned well to be a phenomenal grape-growing region, and that's where the history has been for so long, is growing some phenomenal world-class wine grapes, like you said, that were sourced from all over the country. People came to Lodi to get grapes, and it's a great story to continue to tell, and for people to now be able to come here and have so many options to taste through things. We've got a real broad diversity of growing climates here in the Lodi area. One of the things that I think is always interesting is that people don't necessarily realize that Lodi is coastal California in a lot of ways. We have this inland influence of being in the central part of California, but we have this really fantastic coastal influence as well that comes through the San Francisco Bay Delta, and breezes that blow through the Delta and come in and cool down the valley and the growing area at night. So it just makes for some fantastic growing conditions.
I like to tell people a story about a couple of years ago when a seal was caught crossing I-5 here in Lodi. It swum all the way up the Delta.
Right.
And you think of a dog or a coyote, but we actually have seals crossing the freeway here. Fortunately, it wasn't hit, but you will find them up in our neck of the woods as well.
Sure. Well, that's always kind of a fun thing to realize. It's not just, you know, the interior part of California, but we get that influence, and you know, I mean, everything from the famous humpback whales that come through the Delta and up this direction and then on out. So
our cellar mistress from Des Moines was just asking how far is Lodi from San Francisco, and we are about an hour and a half drive if the traffic's cooperating.
Right. If the traffic's cooperating.
About 90 miles east.
Yeah.
Almost directly east.
So it's a fantastic place, a fantastic destination for people to come to. I mean, Lodi is centrally located to a number of major metropolitan areas, and so we can definitely get people here to Lodi to experience our fantastic wines from any sort of location. So shall we dive in and start trying a little bit of wine this evening?
Sounds like a plan. I could sure use a drink.
No doubt. Why don't we start with the Uvaggio Vermentino? This is a 2011 Vermentino. Jim Moore is the winemaker, and actually his winery is not located here in Napa, but he's one of those that recognizes the phenomenal fruit from the region and comes over and sources his grapes from here, doesn't he?
His winery is in Napa, but he sources all his grapes here in Lodi. Vermentino, for those aren't familiar with it, is believed to be from northern Italy originally. It's actually the same grape as the Hungarian ferment, which makes the great Tokais that you see from there. Jim's a strong believer in this variety and thinks it has huge potential in the area. You tend to see in our market in the U.S. a domination of Cabernet or Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio to a lesser extent nowadays, but he's a big believer in this variety. Thinks it's well suited for the Lodi climate and soils.
Absolutely, and it's got a beautiful floral nose to it, but a little bit of acidity.
I think it's known for its kind of aromatics. It's got a kind of it's not as aromatic as like a Muscat variety, but it's along those lines, kind of like a Malvasia or something along those lines. I get a bit of a perfuminess. There's a slight oiliness to it too. It has nice acidity and brightness and freshness. Jim likes to keep his wines alcohol fairly low. I think it's about 12.6% on this.
Right.
Make it approachable, food-friendly type of wine.
Sure. This is a great wine too that I could see pairing with all sorts of things. You could pair this really well, I think, with something that's got a little spiciness to it. This seems like a great fish sort of thing, maybe like fish tacos and spicy guacamole or something like that, or maybe even go a little bit out of the box and throw in some Thai I could almost throw in with this. I think that'd be nice.
Jim, I see someone interviewed Jim for an article recently, and Jim actually was former winemaker for Robert Mondavi's La Famiglia brand, which was their Italian line they had going, I think, in the late 80s through the 90s. He's really passionate about Italian varieties. He does, Primitivo and Barbera from the region, but he does a dry Moscato as well. So makes some delightful, lighter styled, refreshing wines, usually at fairly approachable price points.
Yeah, the retail on this is fantastic. It's $14. It's a phenomenal wine for every day. It's just really approachable. Just a beautiful, beautiful glass of wine to have with almost anything in the evenings. So I see that some people are picking up all sorts of different hints of citrus and flowers. Brick's Chicks, it looked like you've nailed it on the head from what I pick up out of it. I'm curious, what are some other folks picking up out of this Vermentino?
One thing I asked Jim earlier today, I actually called the winemaker and I said, so, with Thanksgiving come up, what would you serve this with your Thanksgiving? Is this a Thanksgiving wine? And he said, well, not really. He said, it really gets overpowered with all the flavors you have going on at Thanksgiving. Unless you're, doing an oyster dressing or something like that, it might work pretty well.
I was going to say, I could use this while I'm cooking Thanksgiving dinner, though. That would be my choice.
Yeah, that said, I think it's usually wise to have plenty of options at Thanksgiving to make sure everyone is well lubricated for the relatives that are coming to visit. I see someone's asking about the residual sugar. I think it's a dry wine. I don't think there's any RS residual sugar left in it. Let me check the winemaker notes, but I know Jim tends to like his wines in a dry style.
Crisp like a Pinot Grigio. Yeah, definitely. I think it's got a little more interesting profile to it too. For me, it's not as sweet as some of the Pinot Grigios that are out in the market today, and that's what I really like about it. There's different layers and levels to this wine. It's a lot of fun.
I think the knock on Pinot Grigio is it lacks flavor, which I think some people like in a white wine, but most of us prefer a little more guts to it, so to speak.
Right.
The wine is actually 100% Vermentino as well. Comes from 2 vineyard blocks. The first block is in what is the Jehant area of Lodi. There's 7 kind of AVAs within the appellation. And the second block comes from the Alta Mesa vineyard, which is a little bit to the north. So we sit here in the city of Lodi. Jehant's just kind of north and east of us, and then Alta Mesa is just above that, basically.
The production on this wine harlots, I think that was your question, and I'm sorry if that wasn't, but production on this wine is about 2,300 cases annually. So it's definitely one that if you find it, you might want to pick it up, because I know he goes through it pretty quickly. It's a very popular wine.
I think if I'm reading this correctly, someone's asking, are there other Italian varieties grown in Lodi? And I think yes, there are. And one of the things you see is I think there's 75 varieties being grown at commercial levels now. Our Mediterranean climate lends itself well to a lot of those varieties from warmer climate Mediterranean regions. We've got a lot of growers experimenting with these varieties. Many of our newer wineries and producers, which a lot of them are using these as a way to diversify themselves and have a niche in the wine business. A few of the one of the varieties that's been around in Lodi for a long time is Barbera, and interestingly, it was planted quite extensively in the late 60s and 70s. Originally put in for Gallo Hardy Burgundy, and it formed the nice acidic backbone to that red wine, which was usually comprised of Zinfandel, Petit Syrah, Barbera, Kerrigan, and others, so that's probably some of the older plantings you see in the area of Barbera. You're seeing some newer experimenting with Dolcetto and some of the other more obscure Italian varieties.
Cellar Mistress, I see that you're having a little bit of trouble hearing us, so maybe we'll try to speak up a little bit while we try to figure out the microphone situation a bit better. Our apologies if you're having trouble. I think there's some buttons across the top there too that may help. Hopefully that's a little bit better for you folks. Like Stuart was saying, folks are experimenting with a lot of different things here in Lodi. We're very proud of the fact that because of where we sit and our climate and everything, we actually can grow upwards of 60 or more varieties of wine grapes here in Lodi. So it's really kind of fun because you can experience a world of wine right here in Lodi. We have everything from the more traditional varietals. Our flagship is Zinfandel, which you'll taste a little bit later. But we have folks who are doing Italian varietals, obviously, but then also Iberian varietals and some Rhone varietals. There's some very interesting experimentation going on here, and that 60 different varieties of grapes that we're producing definitely shows that.
So I think we're going to need to move on to our next wine, but I think Vermentino shows that Lodi can do whites as well. You know, we're often seen of it as a red wine producing area, but you know, the proper varieties in the proper hands can make very delightful wines in the region. So the next wine we got is the Klinker Family Duet, which is a blend of Tempranillo and Graciano.
And this is the 2010 vintage again. It's 50% Graciano and 43% Tempranillo. So I think this really goes right to what we were just talking about, showcasing how you can get a world of wine in the vineyards here in Lodi. So these are both beautiful Spanish grapes, a lot of fun in this. Aaron and Linda Kidder have recently entered in. They're some of the newcomers in the winery side of the community here in Lodi, but have been around and been making wine as home winemakers for quite some time now, and I think they've really honed in their craft and have done a nice job, and this is an example of that.
Yeah, this is actually their second commercial vintage. I don't think there was very much of this made. This particular wine was maybe 100 cases. James is asking how many acres of Tempranillo are there in Lodi. I'm not exactly sure. I would imagine there are several hundred. Marcus Bokish of Bokish Vineyards was one of the pioneers with Tempranillo in the area. Started planting it probably about 10 to 15 years ago. Some of the larger wineries have shown interest in this variety to use as kind of what they call a spice box variety to kind of add complexity to their larger wines. But there is definitely growing interest in the variety in the area.
Well, and this is just so nice. I think you get some of the spiciness, but then you get the big, bold, dark fruit in the wine as well. For me, this one is one that I could definitely see going into a Thanksgiving dinner. I think this, you know, if you had a big, something hearty, or maybe not Thanksgiving dinner, but maybe even something a little more cold weather. If you had a big hearty stew or something like that, this would be a great wine to pair with something like that. Maybe a little bit of lamb, something dark in nature.
Yeah, the nose is amazing on it. I personally think that a lot of that comes from the Graciano. It can tend to be a very perfumey variety. It's very rare to find actual varietal Gracianos. It's usually a component in Riojas, but it's not a very large component there. It tends to be a very shy yielding variety, so you don't see it grown very extensively. Marcus Bokish is one of the first to plant it here, and he does a varietal Graciano. It tends to be very aromatic, lending some complexity to the Tempranillo, which at times can be a little heavy and less aromatic.
But it definitely does. That Tempranillo imparts the beautiful color into the wine, and then, you know, it gives a nice balance to it, so that you're getting a lot to play with on the palate in this wine here. You know, we have a number of wineries here in Lodi who are starting with the Italian, or the Spanish varietals. You know, you mentioned Marcus Bokish. Riaza Wines is another winery here that's really focusing in on a lot of the Iberian and Spanish varietals, and that's just a lot of fun for us and for our visitors here to Lodi to come and try. I think it's fantastic, and I see that, you know, said one sip is not enough. It definitely isn't. It's a good thing we all have a bottle here to enjoy.
You know, an interesting side note on the Kidders, they've been a nervous wreck starting their winery, and you know, have asked a million questions along the way, which is good because a lot of people jump into the business without really thinking what they're doing. But this past summer at our California State Fair, they entered 3 wines and got 3 gold medals, and this was one of them. So they're off to a good start, and hopefully will continue to have success.
Absolutely. They're just a wonderful family. You know, Linda Kidder is a hometown girl, and Aaron grew up as a military brat, so to speak, moving around, and then they ended up meeting each other and falling in love and get to share their passion for grapes and wine now with the world. So it's a fantastic thing.
I think one of the things this brand and wines represent is it definitely kind of embodies the trend of, small production, boutique winemaking that you're seeing in the area now. You've got producers that are trying to make really interesting wines first and foremost and build an audience based upon the quality of the wine. And, that's their goal with this brand and these wines.
Well, and I think that shows too. Lodi, like we were saying before, has been a phenomenal producer of wine grapes on the larger platform for a lot of years, and now to have these number of different small boutique wineries in the region begin to try to play and experiment with different things, it really showcases the depth of the wine industry here in Lodi.
I get, on this wine, there's a nice perfume and fruit, but there's also a nice little touch of oak, and I think you use the oak well with it. Tempranillo as a variety, I think, responds well to new oak, and it blends in and gives some sweetness to the wine without it really being sweet.
Some short ribs actually don't sound too bad right now, Cellar Mistress. I know in Iowa it's probably been a little while since you had dinner, but definitely we could have something to go with this right now. That doesn't sound like a bad deal.
Yeah, especially when I had peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch.
And what would you pair with peanut butter and jelly?
I actually had Syrah with lunch. So.
Not a bad deal.
Although it was only 2 weeks old, so it was a little tart and a little bitter.
Stuart is one of our rock star winemakers here in the Lodi area, so he'll definitely be one that we'll get out some wines for you to taste one of these days. But he does a fantastic job, and so Syrah and peanut butter and jelly. That's a pairing I haven't tried before. Let's see, what else would I suggest with the Duet? I think, for me, I think the Duet is really kind of a versatile wine. You could go a number of different directions with it. Obviously, some Spanish food would be great. I think you could also go Italian with some of the spicy sausages in the sauce, or even with some of the cured meats. I think it would hold up nicely with some salamis or even some nice pepperonis and some olives. Something really rich, I think, would be fantastic. Agreed with the folks from Arizona, the Wine Cellars Club. Bolognese would be great with this, especially if it imparted a little bit of that spicy red pepper to it.
I talked with Aaron earlier today, the winemaker too, and he said they had their wine club pickup party this weekend and dinner, and they did a paella with it that just really sang. He was happy with it. So
there's another one. Sounds fantastic. Paella with chorizo. Cellar Mistresses, we're right on par there. So.
All right, we ready to move on to the next wine?
Let's.
So we're going to do the Stuart Zinfandel next.
Now we're getting into what is often seen as kind of Lodi's flagship wine, and that's Zinfandel. We're very, very proud of the Zins that we grow and make here. In fact, here in Lodi, we have a large festival in May of every year, Zinfest, and it draws thousands of attendees to come and try the wines here in the Lodi region. So it's a great place and a great time to come and visit. This is a 2010 Zinfandel. 2010 was a phenomenal year, great growing conditions, and produced some really great complex wines. I think this
couple, yeah. I mean, someone's asking how was the 2010 vintage, and I, from a winemaking standpoint, I would say it was both good and bad, and it really depended on when you were able to pick your grapes that year. Both 2010 and 2011 were extremely cool years in California, and many vineyards struggled to get their grapes right. In 2010, we had some October rains, And when those came, some of the stuff that ended up being picked after the rains was a little bit compromised. That said, most of the Zinfandel, particularly the old vines, were picked prior to the rains. It was an extremely light crop year, so there was plenty of bright natural acidity in the wines that just lend a real liveliness to it. And we did a tasting last week with some other winemakers of a dozen 2010 Zins, and across the board, I mean, you could notice there were different stylistic choices, but they all were just beautiful wines.
Yeah, they were fantastic, and this one is a great example of that. It's kind of got that big, bold Zinfandel flavor. It's got those raspberry and blackberry notes. There you can tell there's the oak to it. It's got a little bit of that vanilla, but it's not overly oaked by any stretch of the imagination. It's a well balanced, complicated, and fantastic Zinfandel.
Yeah, I agree with Alana. The food suggestions are a little tough here, but
wine for dinner isn't a bad thing either.
No, the drive home might be a little tricky though.
Yeah,
you guys fortunately are all at home, I think so.
It's true.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a jammy Zinfandel. It's more, I get a little kind of plummy character up front on the wine. It's got more richness in the mouth than it does in the aromas to me. It's a very kind of middle of the road Zinfandel for Lodi in terms of styles. You see some that are a lot bigger and riper and fruitier. This one I think is more in the middle of the range.
That's an interesting question from Arizona, from the Wine Cellar Club. Do we struggle with high alcohol levels in Lodi Zin? I think it's a matter of style, isn't it?
I think it's a matter of style and preference. Some people, like the higher alcohols in Zinfandels, others do not. I think, one of the challenges with Zinfandel is it's a variety that's very prone to higher alcohol. I mean, you can strive to produce low alcohol Zinfandel, but in our region, and you're making a wine that's true to the site and true to the vineyard and the region, it tends to be on the riper style. And it's not always the winemaker's choice. It's just where it comes in, where it's got the most character.
Sure. But there was a comment that was made just a few minutes ago, and it's true. For a wine that's 15.5% alcohol, you don't get the burn off this. So it's actually the alcohol is well balanced in the wine. I think it's kind of got that moderate tannin level, that medium tannin. That it just for me, this is just a really nicely well balanced wine.
So Joe in New Jersey is asking, what makes Lodi so perfect for Zinfandel? Climate, soil, etc. I think it's a combination of all those things, and I think overarching, one of the real hallmarks of Lodi Zinfandel, its ability to consistently ripen its grapes year in and year out. I think Lodi Zin is characterized by its very fruit forwardness. With like Dry Creek Zins, you'll get that kind of pepper and spice. I think in Lodi, you tend to get really a very fruit-driven wines, blackberry, raspberry flavors that are attributed. I attribute more of that to the soils and the climate, the delta breezes, and the ripening we have during the growing season. The other thing that I think is very distinct about Lodi is that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of acres of old vines, some of them dating back to the 1880s. Many of these vineyards are on their own roots. And, I've had the pleasure of tasting and making wines from own-rooted vineyards versus grafted-rooted vineyards, and the own-rooted vineyards really make distinct wines, I think, that show more fruit-driven flavors than some of the grafted vines. But that's a matter of personal preference.
Right. But I think, it is one of those that you can experiment with a number of things. But like you were saying, the climate here is so different than some other areas, because we do get a lot of that warmth and those warm days during the growing season, which really allow the flavors to develop in the berries, and those cool evenings to allow them to rest a little bit. So I think it really affords the flavor development in a strong way.
Move the mouse over there, Jenny. Hopefully people can still see us, because our monitor went out, so we're just talking to a black screen right now. which is kind of like, Cameron and I are used to talking to ourselves. The rest of the staff generally doesn't listen much.
Right.
One other note, on the own-rooted Zinfandel is, the historical Lodi growing region, the McCullum River AVA, is a very sandy soils, and I think that's kind of this distinguishing thing that's allowed the vineyards to continue to live and thrive without phylloxera causing a problem. We have phylloxera in the area, and we have nematodes and other root problems, but own-rooted Zins still do well in some of these sandy soils.
So I'm looking real quick to see, there's a question from the cellar mistress if this is a 100% Zinfandel, and I believe that it is.
Yeah.
We don't have anything otherwise, and the Dave and Helen Dart, who are the owners of DR, are pretty true to the grape in their wines. So this is, I'm almost positive, 100% Zinfandel.
Yeah, and the notes say it's a blend of two vineyard blocks, one 85 years old, one 55 years old. One of the interesting things I like to tell people is that actually vineyard acreage expanded during Prohibition in Lodi. Our growers at the time had developed routes to the East Coast markets for home winemakers because they've been selling other fruit products back East Coast. And so when Prohibition came, thousands of rail cars left Lodi every harvest loaded with Zinfandels, Alicantes, and other grapes destined for home winemaking.
Yeah. Well, and some of those, like you were saying, some of those vines are still there today. I think there's no better time to come to Lodi than just right after harvest in the fall, as the vineyards begin to change colors. There's that patchwork of beautiful colors. The Alicante vineyards, if you've never seen an Alicante vineyard in fall, there's this bright crimson red that the leaves turn. It's just absolutely spectacular. And they make pretty darn good wines too.
Yeah, I agree. It's starting to open up too. It was a little tight at first, but now there's more, berry fruit flavors are coming through. A little bit of that plumminess is subsiding.
So James, you're asking what makes Lodi such a great grape growing region, and I think it's the climate, it's the soils. We have a diversity of soils here. In fact, when was it? 1990. No, it was 2005. That was 2005. Yeah. In 2005, the Lodi AVA was divided into 7 sub-appellations, and so that really was an opportunity for us to showcase that Lodi is not one homogeneous wine growing region, but rather we have distinctions and differences throughout the entire district, and so everywhere from you get the clay soils and the sandy soils, and in some of the areas you get more rocky influence in the soils, and it comes from the fact that we are cut across in a number of areas by 2 rivers, and that provides some alluvial soils deposits over thousands of years that really have created a distinct and wide variety of soil types here. But then you also have those influences of the delta, and so it's a diversity of growing regions here in Lodi affords us the opportunity to produce a lot of grapes.
One other note before I'll address the Lodi rules question from Brick's Chicks, and but the thing I think that really separates Lodi from other parts of California is the people. I mean, it's got a very distinct sense of community here. Most of our farming families here have been farming the area for 4 or 5 generations. It's not a lifestyle farmers. These are people that kind of grew up farming. They raised their families in the vineyards, and there's an honesty and authenticity that you don't see in other parts of California. And there's a great sense of community spirit too. I mean, they're willing to invest in things that may not pay off this generation, but may pay off in generations down the road. And it's allowed us at the Winegrape Commission to do things that you don't see in other parts of California, which is a great lead-in into our Lodi rules for sustainable wine growing discussion.
And Lodi Rules is the first of its kind third-party certification program for sustainability in the California wine industry, and actually was born out of a very progressive mindset here in Lodi. So a number of families have been multi-generation, 3, 4, 5 generations here in Lodi, as Stuart mentioned, but that has never stopped the folks from looking to the future and being very progressive here. And Lodi Rules was one of those. The grower community came together and developed a self-assessment document that allowed folks the opportunity to look at their operation holistically and evaluate what they're doing in order to move along a continuum, to be doing the things that are right for the environment in which we are growing our grapes and producing our wine. There are people looking at how can they be more energy efficient? How can they do things that work with their employees and their workers to make, and their communities to give back and be a stronger part? And so out of that workbook was born this opportunity to really put some meat on the bones and certify to that measure. So Lodi Rules was developed and has been scientifically and peer reviewed for authenticity, that's not the right word, but for strength and rigor, and other certification programs, including the statewide certification program, were looked at Lodi as a model and as a leader for developing the certification program for sustainability going forward. So you're very committed to sustainable wine growing. What is it that leads you to make sure that you want to be sharing that commitment with the consumer?
Well, I mean, there's several reasons why. I mean, I think, ultimately, we want our vineyards, I get grapes from vineyards that are 111 years old, and I would love to see those vineyards still be here in another 100 years from now. Whether that's possible or not, who knows? Right. But that's, on one level. On another level, I think it's, the practices and part of this program go hand in hand with quality winemaking. And I think, the more we can introduce practices and improve ourselves through, self-evaluation and self-assessment, the better off we'll be as an area. The more you're paying attention to what's going on in your vineyard, ultimately, the better the quality of the wines will be.
And I think it really shows through that we have a strong commitment. We've got over about 20% of the vineyard operations here in Lodi have been certified, 20% of the acreage has been certified under Lodi Rules, and that really shows the commitment to moving forward and innovation that the growers here have. So there was a question with respect to case production on some of these wines, and I apologize, we don't have it for all of them. I know that on the DR, it tends to be somewhat lower production levels.
I think it was 300 cases on the DR.
So we're going to move on now to another Zinfandel. This is one of the Old Vine Zinfandels. This is Fields Family, 2010 Old Vine Zinfandel. Another fantastic wine, showing the age of the vines here really does have an impact and imparts a beautiful aroma and flavor into the wines. This one has a little bit lower alcohol. It's a 14.7%.
Yeah, Ryan Sherman's the winemaker. It's a Sherman Vineyard Zinfandel. His family has owned for a while. He carves out a couple acres that they use for their Fields Family blend. He's an owner in the winery as well. He's striving to produce, in his own words, kind of a more balanced, lighter style of Lodi Zin. He didn't want the big, robust style, but something a little more middle road, a little more acidity and brightness, a more food-friendly wine than a very fruit-driven Zin.
Winey Mom, thank you very much for logging in tonight. We sincerely apologize that some of our shipments were delayed in transit, but hopefully when you do get them, you will enjoy these wines immensely. We'd be happy to talk with you anytime, and so we can set up a time to chat with you and taste through these even over the phone if need be. But thank you for logging in tonight and being with us. This wine has also received some nice acclaim. It received 91 points from Wine Enthusiast, and Ryan is very, very pleased with that. I know he, like you were saying, he works very hard to let the fruit show through the grapes, and I think that this is definitely one of them that again shows that Old Vine Zinfandel characteristic.
This vineyard also comes from the Mokelumne River AVA, which is the kind of sits around the heart of the Lodi. This vineyard actually sits just due east of the Mondavi Woodbridge facilities here in Lodi.
You know, there was a question earlier too about some of the influence of the coast, and I think the breezes and everything that blow through the delta that we've mentioned really allow for the cooling down in the evenings throughout the growing season that imparts such a great quality, because the grapes have an opportunity to rest and aren't just hanging out in the hot summertime weather that some of our neighbors to the south enjoy in the summertime. So we get those nice warm days and those nice cool evenings, and that's fantastic.
You know, there was a question on, you know, what constitutes an old vine, or what do we think constitutes an old vine. You know, there is no legal definition of an old vine in California. My father used to like to define an old vine as something that had to be older than he was. So that's somewhat of a moving target, and I kind of agree with that. That said, you know, most vineyards after about 30 years will start to see decreased production if they're still in production, and so you know, you will start to show the characteristics of what make old vines. You know, they're kind of self-balancing, reduced crop, more intensity, self-regulating, so to speak. The other part of that question was, how long will an old vine be kept in production? It all depends on how long it's, you know, economically viable to keep it in production. You know, personally, I source from a vineyard that's 111 years old, and it yielded 4 tons to the acre this year. Last year it yielded 1.5 tons. As long as the grower can still make a reasonable rate of return on that vineyard, you know, we can keep it farming.
Well, and that is one of those principles too of sustainability that so often is vital from the vineyard aspect, is that it has to be economically feasible. We want to do everything and promote things that are absolutely right, but we also want to make sure that the vineyard maintains the operation going forward for future generations. We see a lot of folks who have maybe not gone through the certification program, but definitely believe in the maintaining the family tradition and the heritage of growing and doing things that are right for their vineyard, for the environment, for the community, so that they can pass on their operation for future generations. And that's exemplified in these old vines that we've got around here.
Yeah, I agree with the comments that said it's so juicy. It is very juicy zin. It's got nice lively acidity in the finish that gives you that kind of juicy, kind of mouth-watering quality that I like in this particular Zinfandel. I think it's got some nice, there's nice little hints of toasty oak on the front end of the wine and the aromas. Usually, Ryan told me he usually puts about 30 to 35% new oak on his Zinfandels. It's in barrels about 15 to 16 months before bottling.
And he uses, on this one in particular, he used French, Hungarian, and American oak. So you get a little bit of all sorts of stuff going on in this one.
Yeah, I would agree. It's got a little lighter body and more elegant than the art, which was a little more robust and kind of a fleshier style of Zinfandel.
You know, the old vine nature of this and imparts a little bit of that almost sweetness, the brown sugary aspect to it. I think definitely could balance out some sort of food that's really big and strong, maybe like something with jerk spices, like Caribbean jerk chicken, things of that nature, that's really got that robust, exciting mouthfeel, and yet this wine would pair well and soften that a little bit, but not overpower it by any stretch of the imagination.
Of course, Zinfandel is always the quintessential Thanksgiving wine, you know.
Yes, I think this would go fantastic with a really nice, nicely browned turkey that's got a lot of herbs stuffed underneath the skin. Let that hang out and soak into the meat there for a while. Might not pair too badly with a little bit of crispy skin too. That's one of my favorite things at Thanksgiving. But this one is another one of those that falls right in line with a beautiful, elegant wine at a $24 price point. Wine Harlots, you're absolutely right. It's nice, it's balanced, it's just a great wine all the way around. And production on this one is really, really low. It's only 175 cases, and so this is definitely one that you might not find out in the market, but if you got on the Fields family website, you could definitely have a couple bottles shipped your way.
All right, should we move on to the next wine?
Let's.
Unless there's any last questions on Zinfandel and Lodi, but we can always come back to that if we have some time. So we're going to move back into another wine, which is Tempranillo, the M2 Tempranillo.
This is the wine that we had mentioned previously that the notes were sent to you via email this afternoon, and unfortunately their Zinfandel tasting sheets had made it into the packs, but
which they make very good Zinfandel in case you're looking for one.
They do. There's not too many bad Zinfandels in the Lodi region, but this is another really nice wine. Again, goes to the playing around with the Spanish varietals. Lane Montgomery is the winemaker and takes a lot of time and attention with his wines. Really likes to play and look for the nuances and the balance in the flavors. I think this is something that he just recently released and has an opportunity to be consumed here in the very, very near future, but might hang out for a little while as well.
So the Tempranillo comes from the Kirschenman Vineyard, which is also in the McCullamy River AVA. It was originally, I think it was grafted over about 10, 15 years ago. Costantino Winery used to do a vineyard designated wine from this vineyard. It tends to produce a very big, ripe style of Tempranillo. Lane uses a fair bit of oak on it, so there's a nice perfume of oak, which I think lends itself well to Tempranillo.
Rick's chick, I hope you were able to find another glass real quick there. Didn't mean to get you so excited about the wine that you broke it. The question on the Tormenta, I don't know if I know the story on the Tormenta. Do you?
You know, I'm just going to make this up. Lane Montgomery, the winemaker there, is kind of a tormented soul. He loves to second guess himself, and the rest of us winemakers love to tweak him. So I suspect this is kind of a reflection of his own personality. Well,
if it is, I would definitely say that, Lane's got a softer side to him that has that more approachability, that friendliness, and it kind of comes through in some of the strawberry and the fruitiness of it. It's really a friendly wine. But you're right. There's with the oak aging and stuff like that. There's a level of complexity that really kind of hits heavy. But I don't think it's in a bad way. I think it's really nicely balanced between the fruit and the oak in this wine.
Yeah, and I think he actually used the new oak contribution to this wine is French oak, is what he told me. Was one of the questions.
Yeah.
In the Spanish, historically, particularly in the Rioja region, they did lots of oak aging in American oak barrels, and they did extended oak aging and then extended bottle aging before they were released. I think nowadays you're seeing a wider range of styles coming from Spain, and from those that are more in a California style or New World style, where they're bottled younger, fresher, brighter, bigger fruit. And I think this is a style that Lodi does well with Tempranillo.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I was just looking at a few things from Lane here, and this vineyard especially goes back to what you were saying earlier about the 2010 vintage. Wasn't a huge harvest, and on this one he only got about 2.75 tons to the acre. So this is a real special wine that really allowed the fruit to develop some unique and big flavors in it. The price per bottle on this one is $24 out and about San Francisco. That was the question, and the production, I'm guessing, is relatively low on this one as well. We don't have the specifics on the production.
My guess is a couple hundred cases would be where it's at.
Right. And this is another great winery that you can get on their website, or you can come to, better yet, come to Lodi. Since you're only about 90 minutes to the west of us, come here, and Lane would be happy to sit down with you and taste through all of his wines. He's got some phenomenal Zinfandels, the Tempranillos, and some of the other stuff that he does.
I think Tempranillo, particularly in this style, is very much a food wine. It really craves something rich and meaty, something that actually, for lack of a better term, has a higher fat content to it, like a ribeye steak or something like that, or braised meats, where there's something for all the tannins in this, the chalkiness and the tannins to grip onto. Yeah,
I could even go with cheeseburgers or something like that, something real big and that kind of imparts that juicy oiliness like you were talking about. Slather on some real big meats or big heavy cheeses on top of it and go with that. That'd be great. What about for the vegetarians? Real spice rubbed tofu, grilled tofu.
Cameron's mostly a vegetarian.
Yeah, as I sit here and tell you about cheeseburgers, I'm most closely to vegetarian. Yeah, I can see some heavy marinated grilled tofu pairing nicely with this as well.
You could also do a vegetarian paella too, and leave out the chorizo and fish.
Yeah, I still do my fish. But this is for me, the vegetarian, I think, is always kind of a fun one to go with some of the pairings because it actually allows you so much diversity in what you can pair with wine and food. You can almost pair any vegetarian food with any wines. Now, when you start going into things like more of the vegetable heavy Thai dishes or things like that, it may not hold up well with a Tempranillo. That's when I'd go back to my Vermentino, but I think there's some great opportunities to pair almost anything with vegetarian food because you can spice it whichever way you want.
Yeah, and I think one of the tricks with a wine like this is there's a lot of tannin in there, and there's a fair bit of alcohol too. And if you get something that's too spicy hot, it's going to bring out the bitterness and the tannins in the alcohol in the wine. So I think you want to avoid that. Same with something that's too sweet too. Something nice and savory.
Yeah.
I think we better move on to our last one.
I think so. We don't want to keep you folks up, especially those of you on the East Coast. We don't want to keep you up all night. Unless that's what you're into. So the last wine we've got for you this evening is Klinker Brick 2010 Farrah Syrah. This wine is actually named after Steve and Lori Felton's daughter Farrah, and it's a fantastic example of another variety that grows really well here in Lodi. This one, you'll note that it has about 14.9% alcohol. It's a really complex, beautiful wine with a number of different layers to it. The winery mom had a quick question. The abbreviation of M2.
Well, the funny thing is the original partners in the wine were two guys with the last name of M, but they kind of got in a bit of a disagreement, and now there's only one M, but they kept the name M2 after Lane Montgomery, the winemaker. So.
Right. And maybe it speaks to Lane's dual persona.
But she may be asking about the alcohol on the wine, which is, I think, what she was.
Right.
Which was I was looking, then you got me all confused.
I got you all confused. I ruined everything. I thought it said ABV. Shows you I need my glasses too.
It's 14.5 on the label. My guess is it's probably pushing right around 15% though.
I was thinking abbreviation. So anyways, back to the Farrah Syrah.
I just spilled their dirty laundry now.
Yes, you did. Well, hey, we've all got them, right? But that's part of Lane's character. So this one is beautiful. It's got some very interesting notes on the nose. I always pick up bacon fat. Even being mostly vegetarian, I still love myself some bacon every now and again, and I can really pick that up in this one.
Yes, it is a very very pretty package on the wine. I saw somebody ask it in the traditional Burgundy bottle. Steve Felton, Klinker Brick Wine. He's one of the smart vintners here in that he started out only making one wine, which was the Lodi Zinfandel at first, and he built some success with that, and then has layered in a couple of other wines. He was a grower first and foremost, still farms a fair bit of grapes. Now he makes, 2 Zins and a Syrah and a couple club wines as well too.
Well, I think, that exemplifies a lot of the wineries here in Lodi is they were born out of wine grape growing families and continue to produce a lot of the grapes that they bottle into their own wines and work with their fellow neighbors and winemakers to craft these beautiful wines. Wine Cellar Club asks a question of if we could compare Lodi Syrah to Syrah from our brethren in other areas such as Paso Robles, which is also a Rhone varietal region. And I think they've got a lot of similarities in some senses climatically. They are a little bit closer to the coast, so they do get a little bit of the cooling influence, but they also get those warm days. But in some areas of the Paso Robles wine growing region, they stay warm even in the nights and don't have those delta breezes to cool them off like we do.
Yeah, if I had to make a broader generalization, I think you might see from their cooler sites a little more structure in their Syrahs, where in the Lodi you'll see a little more fruit-driven profile. I think they have more vintners that are focused on Syrah there, so you're going to see a broader range of Syrah-style wines coming from the region. We still have quite a bit of acreage of Syrah in the district. Most of it was planted, in the late 90s, early 2000s. It can make very delicious kind of fruit-driven style of Syrah.
Well, I think that's one of the characteristics that really transcends through all the wines that we have here in Lodi is that they've got that strong fruit characteristic, and I think that really is a hallmark and a benefit to a lot of our Lodi wines is when you taste any variety of Lodi wine, you really get that true fruit flavor and that true to form what's being produced in the vineyard. James, congratulations on your first Syrah from Lodi. I'm glad you like it. The Feltons are one of those that are also a great family, very progressive in their commitment to promoting Lodi and are out on the road oftentimes evangelizing and sharing the Lodi story and their family story, and then that almost leads the way for most of our vintners here before they ever get to talking about their wines. And it really comes back to what you were talking about earlier, Stuart, about the strong sense of community here. And when people come here to visit, they get that. It's a community. It's a strong, authentic nature of really wanting to be here and to share the craft that they've got. I think that's something special.
Any other questions, I suppose? We're winding down here.
Let's open it up. We'd love to answer any questions about Lodi. We'd love to answer questions as we can about the wines that you've tasted this evening. We'll open the floor there for a few minutes. Let you hang out and enjoy the Syrah while you're at it, or any of the other wines that you want to go back to. I love the idea of wild mushroom risotto with this Syrah. Maybe it's because, as someone pointed out earlier this evening, it's still dinner time here on the West Coast, and
you're mostly a vegetarian.
And I'm mostly a vegetarian. But James wants to pair it with a ribeye.
I think I would go for the ribeye.
How about a ribeye with some risotto on the side?
Sure.
And then we'll keep ourselves happy all the way around.
I often have trouble convincing my wife that this is actually work when I get to sit around and drink and eat food for a living, but it does have its moments.
Absolutely. It's one of the benefits of what we do, and we're so happy that you all joined us tonight because we love sharing wine with everybody that we have the chance to. We are so happy to have the opportunity to showcase these 6 wines with you this evening. Hopefully we can have the opportunity to do this again, or have you come to visit us here in Lodi so that we can share even more of some of the 85 wineries. So Cellar Mistress, you're moving to Napa. You should move here to Lodi first, but you could definitely contact us at the Lodi Winegrape Commission. Our website is www.lodiwine.com. We would love to set you up with a tour and have you come and visit us, and that goes for all of you. We would definitely love to take you around and show you what's so special about Lodi. Okay. Fantastic. Well, if we don't have any other questions, again, thank you so very much for coming tonight. We look forward to connecting with you, and if at any time you have other questions, feel free to contact either myself or Stuart at the Lodi Winegrape Commission. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for joining us.